The following telephone recordings were made by Evan Doorbell in the fall of 1976 from the Trafalgar 7 Schuyler 4 panel office in New York City. This narration is being done in January and February 2022. I'll be speaking in the present tense to give the listener the feeling of going along for the ride as I explore a network of old tie lines set up by the Bell system for a New York-based insurance company 46 years ago. None of this is relevant to today's world. It was the New York Telephone Company, not the insurance company, which was responsible for leaving open the doorway that made this exploration possible. So now let's call back the same way we did before, dialing 578-4521. That puts us on a tie line from the New York home office to a crossbar PBX, which I refer to as 452 since that's its tie line code from New York. From there we can reset the trunk and dial 81 to go to the home office, and there are 3 other tie line codes I want to check out to see how they sound. All right, we're in the main office. Let's try the code 446. We'll see what kind of dial tone we get, and we'll try to get a ring. At first, I thought that was a double ring the PBX was giving, but actually it's some sort of an immediate ring feature. It rang a short little ring and then it went into this regular rhythm. Anyway, we now know that 446 has that very common dial tone we're hearing all over the network and rings like this. Let's try 449. New dial tone, maybe this is a centrex. Well, I tried dialing 9 plus 411, and I didn't even get out. Just did this. With the new dial tone, I was thinking maybe it was a crossbar 5 or ESS centrex, but this is probably one of those Bell System crossbar PBXs called a 770. Has kind of a toneless ring. This is the busy signal. And I couldn't get out on 9, so let's try another one, 441. .441 has a new dial tone too. Let's try to get a ring here. Well, that's a modern tone ring, but with that timing, 1 second on, 4 seconds off, that's not a CO centrex. It's something very modern, at least for 1976. This could be a Dimension PBX, very new.
Hello.
I hung up because the supervision, the answer signal, got back to me. So let's start over, but this time let's use a different access number to get into the network. Now, up to this point, we've been getting into the network by dialing 578-4521, and that meant that every time I reset the trunk, we went back to the 452 dial tone, a particular crossbar PBX that times out to a reorder tone. From there, I was dialing 81 to get to the home office, and then a 3-digit tie line code from there, and so on. This time, let's start fresh by dialing 578-4461. The 446 PBX we got a sample of right at the beginning of this program. It has a very organic sounding ring. And we can go directly into it instead of looping around to get it by just dialing 578-4461. That'll put us right on an SF-controlled trunk, probably, to that PBX. We can whistle it off and see how it sounds closer up. I see the dial tone times out to a ring after 10 seconds. What the? That's really interesting. I have no idea why it sounds like that. This definitely has the immediate ring feature. And on each individual line, the ring sounds slightly different. I hung up. Apparently all I wanted to do was get some of that cool organic sounding ring on tape. This PBX probably didn't have any tie lines available, so there wasn't anything to do with it but call and listen to the rings. 451, which we heard in the last program, has an unusual dial tone. Not super strange, but the constellation of overtones is rather atypical. Let's call up and hear that directly, dialing 578-4511. All right, the one dialed by Amsterdam Tandem made it go to reorder. Let's reset. Okay, first of all, there's something very strange about this low tone. I noticed it before. Now that I hear it close up, this sounds like it is an attempt to make an old-fashioned type dial tone by additive synthesis using high harmonics of 120 hertz. I mean, does this sound like a high-pitched tone or a low-pitched tone? To me, it sounds like a low-pitched tone with the low frequencies missing. It sounds like harmonics of 120. So I tried a little experiment here. How's this? Pretty good, huh? I made that myself, and it was easier than I thought because all I did was combine 480 Hz with 600, and it makes this dial tone. And isn't it interesting, because to me it really does have that 120 Hz feel. And these two tones are usually present in 120 Hz dial tones. So just putting those two tones together makes a fairly convincing old-fashioned tone. And what was Bell Labs thinking? Well, I think this is what they were thinking when they did this. The idea that I think they had in mind was to make a low-pitched feeling tone out of high tones, but that's 480 and 620, which to me sounds like a high-pitched, albeit weird, tone. But just change it to 480 and 600, now that feels like a low tone with no balls, but close. Although I have to admit, now that I've compared it to that other tone, I can also hear it as a high-pitched tone. But anyway, I don't know what happened at Bell Labs. They must have started out with this idea. 480 and 600 are harmonics of 120, which is the bass tone of the old-fashioned dial tones and busy signals. The difference between those two frequencies is 120. Put them together and sounds like the old tone. Why did they go with 480 and 620? The difference between them is 140. Neither is a harmonic of 140. And actually, this produces a subtle overtone of 340 to my hearing. This. And that's certainly not a low-pitched tone, so I don't know what happened at Bell Labs. They must have tried 480 and 600, and for some reason didn't want it. Anyway, I could actually digress more, because in the making of this program, as soon as I heard this dial tone, I started getting visions of my Kawai K5 synthesizer that I was using in 1987 and 88 to build beautiful sounds from scratch using additive synthesis. That was made by just dialing in the numbers, but I had a toy chime piano to inspire me as to which overtones to put in. I made a whole bunch of really pretty metallic sounds, none of them real, all dialed in by the numbers. I wouldn't recommend the K5 though, because it had a poor signal-to-noise ratio. Anyway, back to this 451 dial tone. The PBX we zoomed in on before, 446, had a dial tone that timed out to a ring. Probably that goes to the attendant, and it's probably crossbar. This one, 451, however, has a dial tone that never times out. It's probably a step, and watch what happens. Listen carefully when I dial a 1. Haha, did you hear that little when it went into the reorder tone? Sounds very much like a busied out level on a step. See, there it is, very step-like. However, when you call a ringing number, this PBX makes a loud click right before it rings that's kind of reminiscent of the Bell System's crossbar PBXs. The click I'm referring to is that. And that click is very un-step-like. So I don't know. The Bell System's 756 and 757 crossbar PBXs do make a click very similar to that. Ah, cool, the revertive pulsing crosstalk we get sometimes in New York. Anyway, here's another ringing number. This time that same click occurs, but the ring starts right before it. I hung up, so that means I had checked and there weren't any tie lines or outside lines to record. For the next two calls, I was using a different method for putting the 2600 onto the line. I was trying to improve the sound quality, but that didn't work out too well because it added hum. You'll often hear a low-level 2600 right before I'm about to dial a digit. Actually, we heard that on the last two calls too. But also the 2600 when I reset and dial will be very low volume. You'll be able to tell when I'm dialing, it's just it won't be very loud. Now let's start over and dial 578-4401. 440 is another crossbar PBX. It's similar to 452, except when its dial tone times out, you get a busy signal. And on the 440 PBX, the home office is reached by dialing 61, not 81. And there's another difference. The last digit, 1, was actually received by the 440 PBX, so it went to a busy signal after waiting. Let's reset. Stopping the tape for a minute. The dial tone timed out after less than 5 seconds, and the reason is that this PBX is almost certainly one of the Bell System's crossbar PBXs called a 756, a 757A, or similar model. It has to time the dial tone out fast because it employs a thing called a register marker, where the register that gives you dial tone and records your digits is in the same unit as the marker, which sets up the call through the crossbar switches. In most crossbar systems, the register and the marker are not in one unit. In Crossbar 5, a customer can hold on to a register for over a minute by pausing a long time between digits, with the interdigital time being over 20 seconds. When the customer finishes dialing, that's when the marker is called, and that takes less than a second. But here, anyone who is sitting on a dial tone is tying up one of the few things that can actually make a connection. So they have to time the dial tone out fast. It's an economy that probably made a lot of sense, but it made a PBX where you have to hurry up and dial. The home office, on the other hand, has a step PBX, and there's no need for that dial tone to time out. And so here I'm going to dial 61, which is the code for the home office, and then something vacant just to get the recording to verify that that's what's on 61.
This is the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company recorded announcement. The number you have reached is not in service at this time. Please be sure you are calling or dialing the right number. If this call is within the home office, please dial extension 5555. If you are calling from outside the home office, there will be no charge for this call. And if you require operator's assistance, please dial 578-1211. This is the Metropolitan Life Insurance.
Tried 6-4. Okay, that doesn't do anything. Dial 9. That's an outside dial tone. Oh, it didn't hear me. Let me turn up the tone. There we go. I'm dialing the number of a certain long-distance charge test to see if long distance goes through on this. And if it does, I'm going to be very careful not to make any completed calls this way. It's just amazing, the doors they leave open. That's a crossbar 5. Goes out on a 4A. Well, that worked. Let's reset. I've dialed 9 for an outside line, followed by one more digit on that line, because I'm just curious as to how they handle the partial dial condition. This being crossbar 5, we're going to get a whopping 24.5 seconds to dial the next digit, but we're not going to.
I'm sorry, we are unable to complete your call as dialed. Please check the number or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording. I'm sorry, we are unable to complete your call as dialed. Please check the number or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording.
By the way, that recording cuts callers off, so they get a new dial tone. But notice how we got a new PBX dial tone. We didn't get a new outside dial tone. That's because the lines used for outside calls are usually set up so that you can't get a fresh dial tone in that situation. I think I've heard that it's usually done with ground start lines. When the call drops, you have a complete absence of battery power. The PBX detects that and cuts you off to your PBX dial tone. There are good reasons to do that, although in this case, with the doors wide open, it doesn't seem to make much difference. But maybe when you're calling from the PBX, it won't let you dial long distance.
This is a recording.
We can find out where this 440 PBX is by dialing an invalid office code in the toll-free 800 area on one of the outside lines. We'll see what recording we get.
We're sorry, but we have a problem in completing your call as dialed. Please check the number and dial again or ask your operator to help you. This is a recording, 5134. We're sorry, but we have a problem in completing.
Okay, so that 4A it goes out on is the Dayton, Ohio 4A. Now we know.
5134. We're sorry, but
I'm going to reset this trunk and dial 61 for the home office. Then I'm going to dial 453, which goes to an ESS Centrex. From there, 111 goes to the home office. Then I'll dial 453 again, going back to the Centrex, then 111 back to the home office, and then I'll dial 445 for that Nippon.
we're sorry, but we have a problem in completing.
Wow, you can barely hear it. 2 sets of clicks, and now you can hear it a lot better. Let me try dialing. And now that it's loud, it's ignoring me. And the Nippon just timed out. The Nippon, by the way, is a crossbar PBX. Now, I have to stop the tape for a minute and do some explaining, because on that last call, I have learned something really interesting and important for stacking. 453 is an ESS centrex, and from the 453 centrex, the code 111 goes to the home office. When we tried this in Program 1, we found that even though the home office dial tone never times out, there was nonetheless something on the line when we called it via 453 that did time out. It's not timing out. Okay, something just timed out. Yes, and what times out is a register sender that the ESS centrex adds to the tie line from the moment that you seize it by dialing 111 until a certain number of seconds have passed with no digits dialed. So while you're dialing on the tie line, there's a register sender there, storing and then dialing out whatever digits it receives. The other PBXs in this network are just repeating the digits pulse by pulse, having no idea what they are. But when you go out on a tie line from an ESS centrex, like 453, to something else, there is a register sender in the circuit. The register sender makes it hard to hear until it leaves the line. Now, on that last stacked up call we made, there were 2 of those register senders in the circuit. That's why it was so hard to hear by the time we got to the Nippon. But then, after so many seconds with no dialing, each of those dropped out. Now we can hear. But now our digits are ignored. What this means is that if we want to build a stack using a tie line from an ESS centrex, such as 453, we're going to have to keep dialing and not pause too long between digits so as to keep those register senders active, because once any one of those times out, there is no longer the ability to dial all the way down the line. So if we want to include those links in a stack, we can, but we can't go too long without dialing or we lose control. However, we're not going to hear well until those register senders drop out. Okay, now here's a stack not involving the 453 ESS centrex. I'm going to reset, dial 61 for the home office, then 445 for the Nippon, then 8 for the home office, then 445 again, then 8 again, and then 440, which goes back to this PBX that we start out with on this call, except by then the dial tone should be very low. I don't hear the 440 dial tone. Let's turn up the... Oh boy. Okay. So here's what happened. We got down the line successfully until we got to the home office the 3rd time. And at that point, when I dialed 440, the pulses somehow got distorted, probably because of going through all those switches. And so we got a vacant level instead of 440. It might be that the Nippons are not especially good at conveying the pulses accurately. Here's an attempt to start that stack again. I think I was trying to call 445 and I dialed 455 by accident, and this has given us a very loud busy signal from the home office. 455 might be a former tie line that is now discontinued and is just permanently busied out. Anyway, I'm going to do the stack again, but this time I'm only going to put one of those suspected problematic nip-ons in the circuit. We'll reset, dial 61 for the home office, then 445 for the nip-on, 8 for the home office, then 452, that other crossbar PPX, then 81 for the home office, 453 for the centrex, 9, and the number of the other line here. If you listen very carefully, you can hear the kata of the auxiliary sender here. All right, my other line is ringing, and let's connect it in for a second through capacitors. I'll just let you hear it. Yeah, there it is. So what I'll do next is put the tape recorder on the incoming line through capacitors. There, I tripped the ring. This is the incoming call. Now flash the hook on the outgoing call. All that does from a Bell System non-step line is make loud ticks. Ben and I use it to see how the transmission is. Not very good. You're going to hear the 2600 beating, and that's my synthesizer's tone, which leaks through every time I have it ready to go, beating with the actual 2600 on the incoming call. Okay, now I'm going to send some 2600 bursts from the calling end. All right, now the same thing, but with both lines on. So we'll be listening to both lines at once. Okay, we're on the incoming only. I'll flash. And now, hanging up the outgoing line. Ah, that's great. You know what's funny about these stacks is the transmission is really poor. These are not very long stacks. You know, the ones we did in the long distance network were a lot longer, and you could talk from one end to the other. These, not so much. Now, in this last example, you could actually hear me hanging up the phone. That's the first tick coming up here. But in following programs, there are stacks where you literally cannot hear the beginning of the call from the end. And when the disconnect occurs, you just hear the sounds of trunks falling, just sort of emerging from the darkness. That'll be in following programs. And the reason we can make stacks that are longer than you can hear is because these are created by dial pulses coming through the network, and those are conveyed one trunk to the next, to the next, to the next, and it doesn't matter that you can't hear from the beginning to the end. In classic tandem stacking, it does because the tones of the phone freak have to get all the way down the line in order to build it any further. Okay, now let's call 578-4531. That'll put us on the ESS Centrex directly. On this call, there's a lot of microphonic crosstalk coming from the panel we're dialing from. You can hear PCI senders and all sorts of metallic stuff. I've dialed 9. Now I'm calling a long-distance charge test. And this being number 1 ESS, it's going to cut us off to a busy signal. ESS, what can I say? Okay, what happens next is I'm going to do a stack. I'll dial 111 for the home office, then 445 for the Nippon, then 8 for the home office, 452 for that crossbar PBX that we were using at the beginning of program 1. From there, 81 goes to the home office, then 440, which is the crossbar PBX that we started on last call. From there, 61 goes to the home office, then 453 to go to the centrex again, and there I'm going to dial 9 and the number of my other line. As this call is being set up, the longer digits you will hear being mirrored by those 2 register senders that came into the circuit both times that we went from the centrex to the home office dialing 111. So there's going to be 2 of those. And also there's going to be a lot of panel noise. Here goes. I'm dialing 1 every few seconds to keep the register senders from dropping out. Now I'm going to bring the other line in, trip the ring, and keep dialing once. Now I'll dial a couple of zeros. Now I'll put the tape recorder on the incoming line, flash my hook a little bit. Okay, that first click was the second register sender dropping out. The rest of those were my flashing my hook. Not very audible. Now the two lines together. And what I'm about to do next isn't very smart in my opinion. With the lines tied, I'm going to reset the trunk. That'll give us the 453 dial tone on one line, while on the other line you'll hear the stacked call disconnecting, both at the same time. Okay, that was a pretty dumb way to end it, but there are plenty more where that came from, and there are longer stacks. At the beginning of the next program, I'm going to start out by dialing 578-445-1. And if you think about it, you know what that means. Hey, there it is up close. That's next.